So dear friends, we are at the close of the month of November, and 26th of November is a big feast for us, the feast of Christ the King. Let me begin with that, because that is the message of the week this time, that we are a kingly people. You know, there are certain countries that celebrate the King's Day, the Queen's Day. It's almost a holiday for the whole country, and they rejoice in their king, in their queen. That's the type. I think for the church, it's a King's Day, the Christ the King feast. 26th of November this year, surely it's a Sunday. What's special about it? Rather, what's special about Christ the King? Christ is our King. There's no doubt about it. But then the way he is depicted as a king is very different from our attitudes, from our knowledge, from our experience, even perhaps our celebrations of the kingly feast. First of all, that's the last Sunday of the year. The liturgical year ends with the feast of Christ the King, and then we begin the advent of the child king, the Prince of Peace, Jesus himself. And so this Sunday is the church rather gathers everything and keeps it in front of Christ our King to say that the heavens and the earth, the rich and the poor, our joys and sorrows are with you, our King. I would just sort of split a little what the king and kingship means. You know, when I say Christ the King, I have to speak about the shepherd, the good shepherd. It's a shifting from one base to another base, and from the shepherd, I go to the flock, I go to the poor. The poor. That's the transition that we can make of this kingly idea. The feast of Christ the King, as I said, embraces the whole reality, the whole universe. So first of all, we say, what is kingly about Jesus? Because the moment we say about a king or queen, we cannot but think of the finery, the gold ornaments, the rich, perhaps the furniture, the palace, the regal atmosphere, the darbar. In our language, you call it darbar. And the king is inaccessible. The king is unapproachable. At the most, you could meet one of his ministers, one of his small servants. You can never expect to meet the king. That's the idea of the world of a king. And what does Christ the King give us an impression of a king? He is a king not with armies. He is not a king with guns and perhaps soldiers, legions of soldiers. Rather, he is a king who doesn't become by force, by army, by violence, but is a king of hearts. His victory is over sin and death. The most frightful things, everyone's scared of death. And therefore he is king over the death, he is king over the evil powers, the sin. And how does he do it? Once again, it's not big battles, atom bombs that he uses, but his own sacrifice, his death on the cross. He humbles himself. He humbles himself to such an extent there's nothing left about him. And that is why the St. Paul's letter to the Philippians, chapter 2 says, that is why God has exalted him above everything else, because he emptied himself. So that's the first idea of the king that we can get. Secondly, in the first reading today, the other idea of a king, that is a shepherd, a good shepherd. Just as a shepherd bows down, rather he cries, he embraces the little lamb perhaps that is wounded, that is crying, and he takes it to his old shoulders. You know, the lamb must be feeling royal itself to be carried by the shepherd. But that's the idea of our king, that he goes down to reach out to everyone who is in need. And as the flock, we follow him. He is ready to die for us. The Good Shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. He puts himself into danger. He puts himself in our situation of joys and our sorrows. So that's the kingly, perhaps, image that we can give of a shepherd. Now, thirdly, what does he expect his people to be, his subjects to be? We can't, most of the kings are so high, so rich, so inaccessible that his people become servants, slaves, abject subjects that perhaps have no value at all. But our King gives us the highest value, considers each one of us special. But at the same time, he doesn't say that I am king so that anything can be done, anyone can come, anything is allowed here. No, not necessarily. Our king makes a distinction between what we call the good and the bad. Those who are not of this world, or rather those who are clinging to the power and authority, and the king who identifies himself with the marginalized. We have a beautiful gospel today. Gospel of Matthew, almost one of the last chapters of 24, 25, they speak of what we call the last judgment. The last judgment. And in this judgment, those who are going to be judged are judged according to their works, according to their attitude, according to their behavior, and therefore the good and the bad. The good sheep, the sheep on one side and the goats on the other. And he tells the ones who are on the good side, I have recognized every good that you have done. I have recognized that you have given food to the poor, the drink to the thirsty, clothes to those who are perhaps naked. You have visited them in the prison, and therefore come and enjoy. And surely the good ones will be surprised and say, when did we ever meet you? When did we ever visit you? When did we ever give you food or drink? And as long as you did to the least of my brethren, you did it to me. So also for the evil ones, you never gave me food. You never recognized me. You never visited me. And so they also will be shocked to say that if you had told us when you are coming, you had announced your coming with some trumpets and some invitations, we would have surely come forward and recognized you. Jesus says, not necessary. As long as you did not do it to the least of my brethren, you never did it to me. And that's going to be a sort of identification of Jesus with his subjects, identification with the poor. Mother Teresa beautifully used to say, she was really saintly, and she says that I see Jesus in every wounded person. I see Jesus in every sick bed. I see Jesus in everyone who is perhaps left and marginalized. I see Jesus in the lepers. That's how she recognized Jesus, and that is perhaps the kingly, the heart, what we call the King of Hearts would attract us to be. So my dear friends, our last judgment wherein we are going to be the King is going to be according to what you have been here, not what you wish to be. Not what you dreamed to be, but what you have really done. So therefore, on the feast of Christ the King, Christ reminds us that I will recognize you. Or perhaps I will not recognize you by the good deeds that you do. So let us bow ourselves in front of Christ the King, remembering that he is not the kingship of the world, his kingship of a different nature. His kingship is of identifying and getting close to the poor, the poorest. I know it's easy for me to say that, but very difficult to do it. But we ask God for His grace to recognize in each one of us and every one of us the figure of Jesus Christ the King.